2 days before my wedding, my in-laws threw a prenup at me. What they didn't know was that I wasn't some broke girl they could push around. I had $81 million of my own, a sharp lawyer, and a plan they would never see coming. Stay with me as I take you through this story, and if it moves you in any way, don't forget to show some love by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people can hear it too. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and I built my own life from the ground. When I was 16, I lost both my parents in a car accident. I had no safety net, no rich relatives waiting to help. I worked jobs nobody wanted, studied at night, and poured my heart into building something for myself. At 24, I created a mobile app that grew beyond my wildest dream. A few years later, I sold it for $81 million. But I never flaunted that money. I lived simply, drove a regular car, and wore clothes that didn't scream designer labels. People looked at me and saw ordinary. And honestly, I liked it that way. David Whitmore never really asked much about my finance. He came from old money, the kind of family that had mansions, summer houses, and country clubs running through their veins. His parents, Charles and Linda, were the classic high society couple, cold smiles, sharp judgments, and an obsession with appearances. From the first day I met them, I felt them scanning me like I was some project David brought home. In their eyes, I was a pretty face with no real background, someone lucky to catch their son. I brushed it off for the sake of love. I truly cared for David, and I thought he cared for me too. But everything changed when, just 48 hours before our wedding, Linda and Charles asked to meet me privately. We sat at their long, polished dining table, the kind that could host 20 people even though there were only 3 of us. Linda slid a folder across the table with a smug little smile. "Just a standard precaution," she said smoothly. "We're sure you'll understand." I opened it. My eyes scanned line after line. It was a prenup, a contract that stated in clear and cruel words that if David and I ever divorced, I would get nothing. No compensation, no share, nothing. I looked up, stunned. "You think I'm marrying David for money?" I asked. Charles didn't even blink. "We've seen this before. Women marrying into families like ours, thinking they can ride the wave. We just want to protect David." My chest tightened. For years, I had carried my success quietly, never needing anyone's approval. And now here they were, treating me like some desperate gold digger. I wanted to laugh. If only they knew the truth. I wasn't the one who needed protecting. I sat at the table, the paper in my hands feeling heavier than it should. Line after line of that contract screamed at me. If David and I divorced, I would get absolutely nothing. No matter what I had contributed, no matter the years I might have poured into the marriage, I would walk away empty-handed. It wasn't just a document, it was a message that I was not trusted, not respected, and certainly not seen as equal. David sat across from me, fidgeting with his watch like a boy caught in a lie. "Rachel," he said softly, "it's just paperwork." My parents insisted. "Don't make this a big deal." His words cut deeper than the contract itself. Just paperwork? He had known about this for weeks. I could see it in his eyes, the way he avoided mine, the way his voice lacked conviction. He had been carrying this knowledge while I excitedly planned the wedding, while I picked flowers and wrote vows for and he chose to wait until the very last moment, 2 days before the ceremony, to drop this bomb on me. "Don't make this a big deal?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "David, this is my future you're talking about. You didn't even tell me until now." He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You know how my parents are. They worry about appearances, about protecting the family name. This isn't about us. It's about them." But that was the problem. It was always about them. Their approval, their conditions, their way. Where was I in all of this? Did he ever once stand up for me? Did he ever tell them that I was more than some girl trying to marry into their money? I felt my face grow hot as the truth settled in. David didn't see me as an equal partner. If he had, he would have defended me. He would have told me about this the moment his parents brought it up. Instead, he chose silence. He chose their comfort over my dignity. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but the humiliation was suffocating. They thought so little of me, and worse, the man I loved agreed enough to keep me in the dark. I remembered the smug look Linda gave me when she handed me the folder, like she already knew I would sign without question, like she believed I had no choice. I wanted to scream that I didn't need a cent of their money, that I had built my own life, my own empire, without help from anyone. But I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I realized something in that moment. Silence could be powerful too. As David reached for my hand, trying to smooth things over with his empty reassurances, I pulled mine away. The distance between us was no longer just physical. Something had cracked, something deep and irreparable. And I knew in that moment I would never look at him, or his family, the same way again. I was walking down the hall of the Whitmore estate, my heels quiet against the polished floor, when I heard voices drifting from the study. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the tone in David's voice made me stop. He was laughing, the kind of nervous laugh he used when he was trying to fit in with his parents. "She'll sign it," David said, his words low but clear enough. "She knows what's good for her." My heart skipped. He wasn't talking about wedding plans or flowers. He was talking about me. Linda's sharper voice followed. "Of course she'll sign. What choice does she have? She should be grateful we're even allowing this wedding. Honestly, David, she's a lucky nobody. Without you, she'd be just another face in the crowd." I pressed my back against the wall, breath caught in my chest. A lucky nobody. The words sliced through me like a blade. David chuckled again, and it felt like betrayal poured into my veins. "Don't worry, Mom. She won't make a fuss. She's not stupid. She knows she hit the jackpot with me." For a moment, the world spun. The man I thought I loved, the one I believed saw me as his equal, was mocking me behind closed doors. He wasn't defending me. He wasn't correcting his mother. He was agreeing with her, reducing me to nothing more than a desperate girl clinging to his name. Linda's voice hardened. "She signs, or this circus ends right here. We don't need freeloaders in this family. I will not have some girl draining our fortune because she played her cards right." My hands trembled, but I held myself still. I wanted to storm in, scream, throw the prenup in their faces, and tell them exactly who I was and what I had built. But I didn't. I stayed in the shadows, listening, letting their words burn into me. In that moment, my heartbreak shifted. The ache in my chest turned cold, sharp, and deliberate. I realized something important. They didn't know me. They didn't know the nights I stayed awake coding until dawn, the rejections I endured, the empire I had quietly built brick by brick. They thought I needed them. That was their mistake. I swallowed hard and stepped away from the door, my heart pounding but my face calm. They would never see me break. Not anymore. As I walked out into the cool evening air, the estate glowing behind me, I made a silent promise to myself. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be the one they were expecting. The Rachel who had walked into this house with love and trust was gone. What remained was someone stronger, colder, and far more dangerous to underestimate. The Whitmores thought they were holding the cards. They hadn't realized yet. The real game had just begun. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the prenup spread across the coffee table like a cruel reminder of everything I had heard. My heart still ached from David's words, from Linda's cold sneers, but my tears had already dried. I wasn't going to cry for them anymore. If they saw me as a lucky nobody, then I would let them keep believing it, until the day came when the truth shattered their perfect little world. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. "Anthony," I said when the familiar voice answered, steady and sharp. "I need to see you. It's urgent." Anthony Green had been my lawyer since the early days of my company. He knew everything, my contracts, my struggles, the deal that eventually sold my app for $81 million. He was one of the few people who understood that behind my quiet life was a woman who had built an empire. If anyone could help me now, it was him. Within an hour, I was sitting in his office, the city lights glowing behind him. He skimmed the prenup with practiced eyes, his brow tightening. Finally, he set it down and leaned back in his chair. "They really think you're after their money," he said, almost amused. "If only they knew." "I don't want to fight this head on," I told him. "I don't want a scene, not yet. But I also refuse to let them write me off like this." Anthony's lips curved into a small smile. "Then don't fight the prenup directly. Sign it. Let them believe they've won. But before you do, we'll lace it with one clause. One condition that protects you and flips the script completely." I leaned forward. "What kind of condition?" He tapped the paper with his pen. "A clause stating the agreement becomes void if either party lies about their financial assets or status. It's a small detail, easy to slip in. And considering how your fiancé's family sees you, they'll skim right past it. They'll think it protects them, not realizing it protects you." I felt a spark of satisfaction stir inside me. It was perfect. They were so convinced I was the desperate one, they would never imagine I had wealth of my own. When the time came, that one line of text would be the knife that cut through their arrogance. "Do it," I said firmly. "Add the clause." Anthony nodded, already reaching for his computer. "Consider it done. Just remember, Rachel, this only works if you keep your cards close. Don't reveal anything until the right moment." I sat back in the chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time in days, the weight on my chest eased. The Whitmores thought they had cornered me, but what they didn't realize was that I had been building my escape all along. By the time I left Anthony's office, the plan was in motion. I wasn't the one trapped in their game anymore. They were. The Whitmores knew how to put on a show. Their estate was lit up like something out of a magazine, with glittering chandeliers, fountains running champagne, and waiters in white gloves carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't even pronounce. To everyone looking in from the outside, it was the perfect picture of wealth and power, a celebration fit for royalty. And in the middle of it all was me, Rachel Morgan, the bride-to-be. But the way they treated me, you'd think I was just lucky to have stumbled into their world. I walked through the crowd, smiling politely at strangers who eyed me up and down like I was a curiosity. "Oh, so you're David's fiancée," one woman said with a smirk, her diamonds catching the light. "What a lovely dress." I could feel the unspoken judgment in her tone, the same judgment that had followed me since the engagement was announced. To them, I was an outsider who had clawed her way into a life that wasn't meant for her. At the head of it all stood Linda Whitmore, flawless in a silver gown, her glass of wine held like a scepter. She played hostess with sharp smiles and whispers to her friends, her eyes flicking to me now and then with a look that said I would never belong. During the rehearsal dinner, as we all sat at the long dining table, she finally let her true colors show. She raised her glass and smiled sweetly. "To my son, David, who has worked so hard to keep the Whitmore name strong. And to Rachel," her pause was deliberate, her eyes cutting to me. "Well, to Rachel, who proves that sometimes love really can cross background." The table chuckled politely, but I caught the sneers behind their laughter. A few of David's cousins leaned toward each other, whispering as if I couldn't see. My cheeks burned, but I lifted my glass anyway, my smile calm and steady. Linda wasn't done. As the meal went on, she sprinkled little jabs into her conversations. "You must find all this overwhelming, Rachel. It's not every day someone goes from, what was it, a one-bedroom apartment, to this." Another laugh, another round of polite smiles at my expense. David sat beside me, saying nothing, just eating as though he didn't hear the insults at all. Inside, anger boiled in my veins. Every word was meant to chip away at me, to remind me of the gap between their world and mine. But what Linda didn't know was that her every insult only fueled me more. I wasn't breaking. I wasn't shrinking. I was waiting. I lifted my head and looked around the table, meeting every curious, mocking stare with calm eye. I knew what was coming. They thought they were watching a girl out of her depth, clinging to her place at their table. But soon they would see who I really was. The storm was already gathering, and I was the one holding the lightning. The morning of the wedding was everything the Whitmores had dreamed of: lavish flowers lining the aisles, a string quartet playing softly, guests dressed in designer suits and gowns whispering about the union of two powerful families. To them, it was a spectacle, a merging of names and wealth. To me, it was the stage I had been waiting for. I walked down the aisle, every eye fixed on me. Some looked at me with admiration, others with judgment, but I kept my face calm, almost serene. Inside, my heart pounded, but not from nerves about marrying David. No, it was the anticipation of what was about to unfold. David stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo, smiling that same polished smile he wore at every event. He thought this was his victory lap, that after today I would officially be tied to his name and his family's wealth. He had no idea what was coming. The officiant began the ceremony, his voice filling the room. The words washed over me, but I barely heard them. I was waiting for the moment, the question that always came, the one few ever answered. Finally it came. "If there is anyone here who objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." Gasps echoed through the church as I stepped forward, my bouquet trembling slightly in my hands. I didn't wait for anyone else. My voice rang out, steady and clear. "I object." The room went silent. Guests stared at me in disbelief, their mouths hanging open. David's smile vanished, his face draining of color. Linda and Charles shot to their feet, fury written across their faces. "What are you doing?" David hissed, his voice low and desperate. I turned to the crowd, lifting my chin. "I will not marry David Whitmore." My words carried through the room like a blade slicing through silk. Gasps rose again, and whispers rippled across the guests. Linda stormed down the aisle, her heels clacking against the marble floor. "How dare you embarrass our family like this?" she snapped, her face red with rage. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the prenup, the very one they had shoved in my face days ago. I held it up for everyone to see. "You thought you trapped me with it, but you didn't read it carefully enough." Charles frowned, his voice shaking. "What are you talking about?" I unfolded the pages slowly, savoring the moment. "This agreement is void if either party lies about their financial assets or status. That clause is right here, in writing." The room fell silent again as I let the words sink in. I turned back to David, his face pale and horrified. "You and your family accused me of being after your money, of being a nobody. But you lied by omission. You never once asked about mine." I smiled coldly, the power finally shifting into my hand. The game they thought they were winning had just been turned upside down. The silence in the room was deafening. All eyes were on me as I stood there, the prenup in one hand, the weight of the moment pressing against my chest. David stammered something under his breath, but I raised my voice above the murmurs of the crowd. "You think I came here chasing your money," I said, scanning the room, letting my words reach every single person. "You think I'm just some desperate girl hoping to climb into your world. But let me tell you the truth, right here, right now." I drew in a steady breath. "I'm worth $81 million. Not inherited, not handed down, earned." Every single cent. The room erupted in gasps. A woman at the front covered her mouth, someone else whispered. Did she just say 81 million? The Whitmores froze, their faces draining of color. David's eyes widened like he'd just seen a ghost. I continued, my voice steady, stronger with each word. When I was 16, I lost my parents. I had no safety net, no trust fund, no family fortune to fall back on. While you mocked me as a lucky nobody, I was working night shifts, studying by day, and pouring my heart into building something of my own. I founded a tech company, an app that grew beyond anything I ever imagined. And when I sold it, I walked away with $81 million. Gasps again, but this time the whispers carried anger. Not at me, but at the Whitmores. Heads began to turn toward Linda and Charles, their smug expressions replaced with panic. They treated me like I should be grateful. I went on, my voice sharp. Grateful to sit at their table. Grateful to marry into their money. But the truth is, it was David who was marrying up. It was David who was lucky I ever said yes. Linda finally snapped, her voice shrill. She's lying. She's trying to embarrass us in front of everyone. But Anthony, my lawyer, who had been seated quietly among the guests, stood and raised his hand. She's telling the truth. I've managed her contracts for years. Her wealth is very real. The crowd erupted again, but this time with a different energy. The Whitmores' friends and business partners began whispering harshly, their disapproval clear. I caught sight of a few shaking their heads, some even sneering at Linda and Charles now. The tide had turned, and the mighty Whitmores were being dragged down by their own arrogance. David reached for me, his voice desperate. Rachel, please, I didn't mean any of it. I love you. I stepped back, holding my ground. No. You loved the idea of me staying small, of me depending on you. You laughed when your mother called me a nobody. You let them humiliate me. And now the truth is out. You never deserved me. The weight of my words settled over the room like a final judgment. Their empire of pride had cracked wide open, and there was no repairing it. David's face was pale, his perfect composure unraveling in front of everyone. He stepped toward me, his hands out as if he could pull the words back into his mouth. Rachel, listen. I didn't mean any of it, he stammered. I love you. You know I love you. Don't let this ruin everything. The desperation in his voice might have convinced someone who didn't know the truth. But I knew better. I had heard the laughter behind closed doors, the mocking words whispered when he thought I wasn't around. My chest tightened, but I stood tall. Love me? I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Is that what you call it? Mocking me with your mother, calling me a lucky nobody? Pretending this marriage was some act of charity on your part. The crowd gasped, eyes snapping to David. His face twisted in panic, but I wasn't done. I reached into my clutch again and pulled out folded papers, holding them up for everyone to see. I heard every word in the study that night, David. You laughed when your mother said I was nothing without you. You agreed with her. And just in case anyone doubts me, I handed the papers to Anthony, who began reading aloud. They should be grateful we're even allowing this wedding. She won't make a fuss. She knows she hit the jackpot with me. Anthony's voice carried the words David had written in an email to a friend. The words David thought would never see the light of day. Gasps filled the room, sharper this time. Some of David's closest friends shifted uncomfortably, a few even smirking at his collapse. His carefully built image of the devoted, charming fiancé was cracking apart like glass under pressure. Rachel, those were jokes, David pleaded, his voice shaking. You know how it is, just stupid words. I didn't mean them. I shook my head, my voice cold. No, David, they weren't jokes. They were the truth about how you see me, about how your family sees me. And now everyone else sees it too. Linda tried to interject, her face red with fury. Stop this nonsense. She's twisting everything to make us look bad. But nobody was listening to her anymore. The guests had already turned, whispering among themselves, eyes filled with judgment not for me, but for them. I saw business associates shaking their heads, bridesmaids exchanging glances, even a few of David's old college friends muttering, unbelievable. David's mask slipped completely then. He reached for me again, his voice breaking. Please, Rachel, don't do this. Don't walk away. We can fix it. I stepped back, my voice steady and final. No, David. You broke it the moment you laughed at me with your mother. The moment you decided I was beneath you. The truth is, you were never good enough for me. And in front of everyone who once admired him, I watched the perfect David Whitmore crumble into nothing more than a liar exposed. The ballroom had turned into a courtroom. Every whispered judgment, every mocking smile, every smug glance from the Whitmores was now a weapon turned against them. Rachel stood unshaken, her gown shimmering under the chandeliers, but her poise was sharper than any blade. Anthony, calm and commanding, stepped forward with the prenup in his hand. Let me be perfectly clear, he said, his voice steady enough to quiet the murmurs. The contract signed by both Rachel and David includes a very specific clause. If either party has misrepresented their finances, holdings, or intentions, the agreement becomes void. He turned his piercing eyes toward David. Which means, David has no claim to Rachel's wealth. None. The words sliced through the air. Gasps rippled through the guests. Linda shot up from her seat, her face flushed red. This is outrageous, she snapped, pointing a trembling finger at Rachel. She's manipulated this entire situation. She's nothing but a... Enough, Anthony cut in, holding up the signed document like a shield. Everything here is documented, notarized, and legally binding. Rachel didn't manipulate anyone. She protected herself, something David and your family tried to prevent her from doing. Rachel's gaze was locked on Linda. Calm. Cold. You thought you were forcing me into a corner, she said, her voice carrying across the room. But you underestimated me. You underestimated everything I've worked for. And now you stand exposed. Linda let out a harsh laugh, trying to rally the room back to her side. She's clever, I'll give her that. But don't you see? This was all planned. She just wanted to humiliate us, to parade her money around. But no one agreed. Guests who once fawned over the Whitmores now recoiled from it. The whispers were cruel. Liars, gold diggers, frauds. David stood frozen, his eyes darting between his fiancée, his mother, and the crowd that had turned on him. Sweat slicked his brow. Rachel, please, you have to understand. I didn't mean any of it. I love you. I was just... Rachel didn't flinch. You were just planning to live off me. You mocked me behind my back. You and your family thought I was desperate enough to accept crumbs of affection in exchange for my life's work. She tilted her head slightly, her tone sharp as glass. Tell me, David, does that sound like love to you? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The silence of the room pressed down on him until even breathing seemed impossible. Linda tried again, her voice cracking under the weight of rejection. Don't let her do this to us, she pleaded to the crowd. But her words fell flat. Nobody believed her. Nobody wanted to believe her. Rachel gave Anthony a small nod. He folded the prenup carefully, like sealing away the final evidence. This chapter, he said firmly, is closed. David's humiliation was complete. He had been stripped of power, exposed as a fraud, and left with nothing. Not wealth, not pride, not even dignity. Rachel turned her back to him without hesitation. Her revenge was sealed, and the Whitmores were finished. Rachel rose from her seat, smoothing the front of her dress with deliberate calm. The Whitmores' dining room, once filled with sneers and arrogance, had gone silent. Every eye followed her, but she no longer felt small beneath their gaze. She was not a pawn, not a desperate woman clinging to their approval. She was a woman who had just stripped them bare with the truth. David slumped in his chair, red-faced and hollow. His family still sat stunned, their empire of illusions crumbling faster than any business deal gone wrong. For years, they had laughed at her, dismissed her as a lucky girl who had somehow landed their golden boy. They thought her presence at their table was a gift she should treasure. But now, they understood the irony. They had never been the prize. Rachel's lawyer, Anthony, gathered the final documents into his leather case with measured precision. He glanced at her, a silent nod of approval. The prenup that was supposed to strip her of dignity had instead safeguarded her fortune. Everything the Whitmores had weaponized against her had become the very proof of their downfall. Without another word, Rachel walked toward the door. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, each step steady and deliberate. She didn't need to look back at David. His voice, his protests, his pleas would haunt him more than her silence ever could. He had chosen his family's arrogance over her loyalty, and now he was left with neither. Outside, the air was cooler, freer. Rachel inhaled deeply, as though for the first time in years she could breathe without someone else's expectations crushing her chest. The night sky stretched wide above, and in that moment she realized she had never been bound to their name, their fortune, or their approval. She had built her empire brick by brick, with grit and sleepless nights. And she had walked away with all of it intact. As she stepped into the car waiting at the curb, Rachel let herself smile, not out of victory but out of release. She had given her love, her loyalty, her trust. The Whitmores had seen all of it as weakness. Tonight, they had seen what strength looked like. In her mind, she replayed the sneers, the condescension, the whispers of lucky girl. And then she pictured their faces when she revealed her worth, how quickly mockery had turned to disbelief, then to shame. They had thought their empire untouchable, but in truth, they had destroyed their own legacy. Rachel leaned back against the seat, her eyes sharp, her heart steady. She was not broken. She was beginning again, stronger, freer, untied from chains she never truly needed. And as the car pulled away, she whispered the truth to herself, a closing statement to a battle finally won. They thought I was the lucky one for marrying into money. The truth? David was the one who lost the jackpot the moment I walked away. Do you think Rachel made the right choice by walking away from David and his toxic family? Or should she have given him another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear them. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one.